Hey everybody, welcome to my video today, and we're going to talk about what happened in June of 1685 here near the Topsfield Common. So, William Smith was chosen by the town circa 1682-83 to keep an inn, which was most likely where the old parsonage was. In 1685, the northwesterly line of the training field probably abutted that of the old parsonage. The parsonage stood just northwest of where I am sitting, and it was located behind 104 Main Street on Route 97. So I assume this is so because the inns were usually near the center of town, and the records show that in 1685 or 86, William wanted the boundary lines for the old parsonage renewed. And in 1691 and 92, William Jr. asked the town to release his mother and his brother, Joseph, from their engagement with regards to their lease on this property. And this can all be found in the History of Topsfield, page 42. So, Militia Day training. The Topsfield Common today is part of the militia training fields used back in the 1600s. So here I am, I'm sitting right here. Beginning in 1631, the General Court provided for frequent military training exercises for all healthy men between the ages of 16 and 45 years old for each town. You had to go or face a fine. If you notified the court with a good reason that you could not participate prior to the day of training, then you would most likely pay a lesser fine. The role of the innkeeper was to be prepared to hold meetings in their house if the meeting house was being built, being repaired, or if the meeting house was just too cold. Therefore, the innkeeper needed to keep a fire burning on the days of town meetings. They also were to sell beer those days of meetings, or in this case, the days of military training, and they offered hospitality to those men traveling for a place to stop, rest, feed their animals, and have something to eat and drink. The role of the tithing man. So Puritan rules were to be taken very seriously, as you all well know. The towns had several tithing men to enforce some of the following rules. To keep a watchful eye on the Sabbath day in the meeting house. They had to make sure that the children received Bible instruction in their homes. They watched the taverns and the inns to make sure people weren't drinking too much. If a person was to be called out by a tithing man due to any unruly behavior, all that person had to do, for the most part, was to apologize. If the person did not apologize and their misbehavior escalated, the tithing man had the authority to make an arrest and place the person in the stocks as punishment. So the stocks, obviously, was a wooden frame designed to very uncomfortably restrain a person. This was placed in an area where passersby could perform an act of humiliation on the person being punished. The Topsfield stocks were probably near the meeting house, which was then located in the old section of Pine Grove Cemetery, about a half mile north of the old parsonage in this direction over here. So, here's the story. Militia Day training of troop and horse in Topsfield in June of 1685 was presumably a nice day weather-wise. One might assume so because Lieutenant John Gould retired to a table by a tree with Dr. Bennett of Rowley just after John had dismissed his militia company. So no sooner after these two men start to unwind is when the local innkeeper, obviously William Smith, who was 65 years old, rushed over and pleaded for help, announcing that a fight had broken out at the inn. John stood up and sternly directed Dr. Bennett to stay put until he returned, then hightailed it across the way to the inn. Despite John Gould and William Smith's quick arrival, the fight had already evolved into an all-out brawl, probably best compared to a tavern fight in an old episode of Gunsmoke. Endangered were the lives of William Woodbury of Bass River and John Allen of Andover. The trouble began when Samuel Smith and his brother-in-law Thomas Ellithorpe, both from Rowley, along with Jonathan Platts, also from Rowley, sipped too much cider and got into everybody's face. Samuel Smith and Thomas Ellithorpe were both documented, violent, rebellious men. It also could be that the issues began with Samuel and Thomas versus Jonathan, because a previous court case revealed that Jonathan Platts was not only always a faithful friend to Samuel Smith or Thomas Ellithorpe. Somehow, William Woodbury and John Allen are drawn into the situation and end up at the bottom of a pile of people throwing punches. Maybe feeling like he was suffocating under the raucous crowd, William Woodbury shouted, "Murder!" Dr. Bennett, not heeding John Gould's orders to stay at the table, wound up at the end throwing some blows himself, probably in an attempt to break up the situation. However, miraculously, he made it back to the table before John Gould returned after the fight was over. Now, going back to the inn, Rebecca Smith, who was the wife of innkeeper William, called out to John Osgood as he approached the outside of the house. She said, "Help! John Allen is going to be killed." That's when troopmen of Andover, Joseph Robinson and Henry Ingalls, John's cousin, rushed in to help, with Ingalls getting beat up in the process. John Osgood was told to jump in and help separate the bodies. Osgood replied, "I don't think so. Let's get the constable and the tithing man, please." Finally, Constable Elijah Perkins and tithing men Daniel Reddington and John Pritchett arrive. Elijah told Samuel Smith, "Get out of the house." Samuel glared at Elijah and said, "Let the constable be hanged." Infuriated, John Pritchett chimed in and warned Samuel Smith. Samuel then turned his gaze to Pritchett and bellowed, "If you say one more thing, I will smack you across the face." That did it. They dragged Samuel Smith to the nearby stocks, and he fought them miserably all the way. Thomas Ellithorpe only made matters worse by threatening to chop the stocks and burn the meeting house if Samuel Smith was actually placed into the stocks. The other curious followers encouraged Samuel Smith to acknowledge his brutal behavior, to no avail. However, Samuel's sometimes foe, Jonathan Platts, loudly proclaimed that if he were in Samuel's shoes, he would never in a million years acknowledge this particular criminal act. As if it wasn't enough for one day of criminal mischief, another more violent act occurred later that evening. Before I tell this next tale, it is important to remember that by the 1680s, the Putnam clan was huge, with many cousins sharing the same first names. So when Jonathan Putnam is a witness to the next case involving Lieutenant John Putnam, I cannot be 100% sure if he is referring to his cousin John Putnam, who would have been 28 years old in 1685, or his own father, who at his death was styled as Captain John Putnam, and who would have been 58 in 1685. I assume Jonathan was a witness for his father, Captain John Putnam, due to John's military rank, and most likely his age as well. So then Lieutenant John Putnam kept a wrestling ring open in 1685. Jonathan saw Richard Salter of Andover enter the ring, presumably on his horse. Whether or not John was on his own horse is not clear, though he is in the ring as Richard entered. Richard came within 4 feet of John, who demanded to get back. Richard harshly replied, "I will not." John then struck Richard's horse on the nose. Richard replied, "I will shoot you in the face," swiftly pulled out his gun and shot John at point-blank range in the face. Miraculously, because bullets did not eject in a seemingly straight line out of the guns in those days, John was not killed. The other thing is that Richard said later that though he shot him, John, he would use enough bullets next time to make sure that he killed him. This might make one wonder if Richard was shooting blanks that night. I'm not sure. If those of you that know more about guns than I do, you can make comments in the section below. That would be great. So then a warrant was issued for the apprehension of recalcitrant Richard Salter for insubordination and resistance to authority. However, Richard was nowhere to be found. According to Constable of Andover, Nathan Stevens, Richard fled Essex County before April of 1686, when these court proceedings were set to begin. As George Francis Dow states in his History of Topsfield, page 129, the examination of the testimony of scurrilous speeches against authority upon that day shows that many of the vulgar terms heard when outcasts sass each other were used with identical the same meaning as today. So other men who were present that day, who later testified as witnesses in the following Ipswich court, were Ephraim Wilds, Abraham Howe, Benjamin Stevens, Abraham Foster, Timothy Purley, and Lieutenant John Todd. I just find that really incredible that all of these men we know were present, about a mile down the road this way at this particular situation where this happened. That to me is absolutely mind-blowing. To get a better view of the current site of the old meeting house and the old parsonage, please view my short video on the Town Family Farms, Topsfield, Massachusetts, 1670. Please like or dislike this video and subscribe to my channel if you have not already done so. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a new video next week. Thank you.